The Girl at the POS Stand.
Part 1.
A graduate with nothing. 4 years of university, sleepless nights, a life poured into books and lectures. It all ended with a single, bitter truth. The world had no place for my degree. My diploma was nothing more than an expensive piece of paper. I carried my CV like a hand fan from one office to another, a paper trail of my hopes and dreams. But every door I knocked on gave the same empty promise. We'll get back to you. They never did. I became a ghost, walking through a city of opportunities that were never meant for me. With the little I had left, I started a POS business. This small kiosk, this box of shame, became my entire world. Each day was a battle, a struggle to scrape together a few thousand naira just to keep the lights on and the hunger at bay. My true battles weren't in the streets or at the bank. They were inside my own home with the man I called my boyfriend. Kelvin was a handsome facade over a rotten soul. He beat me until my skin was a map of his rage. Then he'd turn around and demand my body as if it were a debt I owed him. I could have left. I knew I should have left. But deep inside, I carried a wound no one could see, the belief that I was worthless. I convinced myself that no other man would ever want me, so I stayed, trapped in a cycle of abuse that felt like my destiny. To make things worse, my neighbor, Mama Blessing, was a parasite in a tired wrapper. Every evening, she'd stroll into my life with her fake smile and her hand out. Clara, my sister, just 2,000 Nigerian nairas, I go return, am next week. Her next week was a lie I learned to live with. My days were a sad routine. Wake up with a heavy heart, put on a fake smile for strangers, count the pennies I earned, and go home to a life that bruised me, inside and out. It was a slow kind of dying every single day. Life, however, has a way of surprising you just when you're at your most hopeless. One hot afternoon, as I sat at my stand, fanning myself, I saw a man staggering towards me. At first, I thought he was just another drunkard. He looked terrible. His clothes were torn, his face beaten, his whole body trembling as if the world had used him as a punching bag. But even beneath all that dirt and misery, one thing was clear. He was handsome. Broken, but handsome. He stopped right in front of my kiosk, his lips dry, his voice weak. He managed to whisper only 2 words that would change everything. Help me. Before I could even blink, he collapsed right there at my feet. The street erupted in a panicked chorus. Don't touch him. Maybe he's a ritualist. The crowd scattered, crossing the road as if trouble and poverty were a contagious disease. But I just stood there, my heart pounding in my ears. In that moment, 2 paths opened up before me. Should I bend down and try to save this complete stranger? Or should I step back, ignore him, and continue with the miserable life I had always known? For the first time, the choice was mine, and the story truly began. The Girl at the POS Stand, Part 2. I did it. Against all the screaming voices in my head, I brought him in. He was just a shape on the street, a crumpled heap of a man, but I couldn't leave him there. My tiny room, the only place in the world that felt like mine, now held a secret, a risk. I knew I should have just walked away, but some small, stubborn part of me just wouldn't let me. When he woke, I didn't yell or demand answers. I just took care of him. I boiled water and used a worn cloth to clean the grime from his skin. I changed his dirty, torn clothes. It felt like I was tending to a sick child, and in that simple act, I felt a part of my own hardened shell begin to crack. It was an act of grace that even I couldn't explain. His stomach growled with a sound that seemed to shake the whole room. I gave him a plate of food, then another and another. He ate like he hadn't seen food in a lifetime, clearing every plate, his eyes still hungry. This one not food engine, I muttered to myself, shaking my head in disbelief. His appetite was shocking, but the true surprise was yet to come. When he looked at me, there was nothing there, not a hint of recognition. His mind was blank, like a brand new chalkboard waiting for the first word. He couldn't remember his name, where he came from, or how he ended up on that street. A man without a past. I had no choice but to call him Mr. Stranger, the name a constant reminder of the mystery I had brought into my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was this man, really? Was he a kidnapper in disguise, an armed robber on the run? Or maybe, just maybe, a forgotten rich man who had lost his way? The fear was a tight knot in my chest. What if my boyfriend, Kelvin, found out? The beatings would double. What would my neighbors say? Those notorious gossips who could spread a rumor faster than CNN. But still, he stayed. Every day I went to my kiosk, and every day I came home to find him waiting. He offered to cook and clean, begged to follow me, but I refused. No, you'll stay here, I insisted. Nobody must see you. I was trying so hard to protect this fragile secret, to keep our two different worlds from colliding. But fate had other plans. One afternoon, the storm I always dreaded arrived. Kelvin stormed in, full of his usual insults and demands. I braced myself, ready for the familiar pain. But this time, a new presence filled the room. A voice I'd never heard before cut through the chaos. Leave her alone. Later, I saw the truth of his power. I caught him at dawn, training silently in the back of the house. His punches were sharp, his kicks deadly. He moved with a speed and precision that was terrifying and beautiful all at once. He was a natural fighter, someone who had lived and breathed fighting his entire life. My fear began to melt away, replaced by a deep and powerful curiosity. I stood there, watching him in the early light, terrified and amazed at the same time. The man who had been a helpless stranger was now a silent warrior. Who was he? I couldn't stop asking myself that question. He still had no answers for me, but his presence had changed everything. He was a puzzle with a missing past, and I was the one holding the pieces. As I looked out the window, all I could think about was him, his strength, his mystery. The fear was gone, and in its place was an intense desire to know the truth. Who are you? I had whispered that question to him, but the answer was still a shadow. That, I knew, was a question part 3 would have to answer. The Girl at the POS Stand. Part 3. I didn't just take in a stranger. I invited a whirlwind into my quiet life. He was a puzzle I couldn't solve, but I found myself waiting for his pieces to fall into place. Every morning began with his loud, booming laugh echoing from the small room he occupied, and every evening ended with us behind the house, laughing at my clumsy attempts at martial arts. In those moments, with the laughter and the scraped knees, I didn't care about the risk. I was just happy to have a friend. But the laughter couldn't fill the holes in my pockets. The reality of 2 mouths to feed gnawed at me. My 5,000 Naira's daily income, which had been a struggle for 1, was now a constant, heart-stopping juggling act for 2. The bags of rice finished faster than I could afford to replace them. The stew pots were emptied quicker, and the knot of anxiety in my stomach grew tighter with each passing day. My shoulders felt heavy, and the simple act of counting my money at the POS stand became a silent prayer. He saw it all. He always did. One evening, he sat me down on the small stool in front of my stand, his usual playful demeanor replaced by a serious, thoughtful gaze that made my heart skip a beat. "Clara," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, "I can't keep sitting here while you break yourself. I need to work." I wanted to protest, to tell him he was meant for more than a common job, but the fierce determination in his eyes was something I couldn't argue with. He left every morning with nothing but his hands and an unshakable will. He had no ID, no certificates, no proof of who he was or where he came from. He was a man with a blank past and an uncertain future. I watched him go, pounding the hot Lagos pavement, searching for a job. I felt a strange mix of pride and fear, wondering if the world would be kind to a man with no history. It felt like a miracle when he came back with a job as a security officer. That night, I rummaged through the small tin where I kept my savings, counting every last Naira. I was going to make sure he started his new life with dignity. He deserved to look the part, to feel a sense of self-worth. It was the least I could do for the man who had brought so much light back into my life. The next evening, I handed him a small nylon bag. "I saved for this," I told him, a shy grin on my face. Inside were decent Okrika clothes. "And please, for my sanity," I added, my voice a soft whisper, "go get a haircut. At least look decent." He didn't say anything, but the way he looked at the bag, and then at me, told me everything. Something had shifted. He got the haircut, and when he came back, the lost man I had found was gone. In his place was a man who looked at me with gratitude and a kind of fierce protection. In that moment, as he stood there in his new, neatly ironed clothes, I knew he wasn't just a stranger. He was my person, my man, with a past I didn't know and a future I hoped to share. He told me all about his terrible boss, a woman with a voice that could curdle milk and a temper to match. She treated him like a houseboy, ordering him to do everything but his job. "Do as I say or get out," she would yell. But he endured it all, coming home exhausted but determined, telling me, "Anything for us." I was so consumed with his struggles that I almost missed the signs of my own. He would tell me about his days, the demanding boss, her sharp tongue, the endless errands that had nothing to do with security. He'd come home utterly drained, but he always managed a tired smile and say, "Anything for us, Clara." My heart ached for him, knowing he was pushing himself to the brink, enduring so much for our sake. I hoped he was okay, that he wasn't overdoing it, that he was coming home to me. But as the night grew darker, the worry grew heavier. Where was he? I was at my POS stand, counting the few coins I had left as the sun began to set. My heart was a drum of worry, waiting for him to walk down the street and give me that reassuring smile. The street lights flickered on, one by one, and still, he never came. The hours passed, stretching into a long, agonizing silence. What happened to him? Why hadn't he come home? And what was going to happen to us? My mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, but all I could do was wait. The Girl at the POS Stand, Part 4. He never came home. The silence of his absence was louder than any noise. At first, I tried to convince myself he was just delayed. Maybe his new boss had him running some ridiculous errand in the dead of the night, like washing a car or scrubbing floors until they shined like mirrors. But as midnight melted into morning, a cold, familiar knot of fear tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just a delay. This was a bad kind of quiet. I grabbed the small little button phone I'd bought for him, our one and only lifeline. My fingers trembled so much I almost dropped it. This little device held all of our conversations, all of our hopes. It was our connection, fragile and all too easy to break. As I typed in his number, my hands shook with a deep dread I hadn't felt since my last relationship. I held the phone to my ear, waiting for the ring, for his voice. Instead, I heard a flat, robotic tone. "The number you're calling is currently switched off." The words cut through the silence like a knife. Switched off? My heart didn't just drop. It slammed into my ribs. Panic surged, a hot wave of it. I slammed the redial button again and again, as if the sheer force of my will could make the phone connect. But each time, the same robotic voice, same message. My heart was doing a free fall, tumbling into a deep, dark abyss. He was just gone. Every day after that, I sat in my POS stand, but I wasn't really there. My eyes were swollen and redder than a fresh pepper. I'd stare blankly at the machine, lost in a daze. Customers would hand me a crisp 1,000 Nigerian Nairas note to withdraw 500 Nigerian Nairas, and I'd just hold it, the details of the transaction as fuzzy as a distant dream. My mind was on a frantic, endless search party for him, running through every street in this city. I would whisper to myself, my voice cracking, did he finally steal my heart and just throw it away like a piece of trash? A single, Traitorous tear would roll down my cheek, hot and stinging, proving my question was a little too close to the truth. Days became weeks. Weeks dragged into months. The hope I had was slowly fading, like a dying candle wick. I was becoming an expert in heartbreak, a master's degree, and why did I let this happen again? One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I buried my face in my pillow, the fabric soaking up my sobs. How could I be so stupid? I wailed into the pillow, falling in love with a man whose name I don't even know. This isn't love. It's a lifetime subscription to pain, a one-way ticket to sorrow. The words felt both true and completely heartbreaking. But just when I thought my life couldn't get any more dramatic, a ghost from the past decided to make a grand entrance. My ex-boyfriend, the one who had bruised and broken me before, came back. This time, he was even worse, colder, meaner, and more possessive than a hungry hyena. My body might have been trapped with him, but my heart was still doing the cha-cha for the stranger who had vanished. What I didn't know was that far from me and my daily torment, Mr. Stranger was lying in a hospital bed in a coma. His so-called boss had dumped him there, not out of care, but just to avoid legal trouble. 4 days, doctors were completely stumped, running tests and whispering theories about rare diseases and brain injuries. Then one morning, his eyelids fluttered open. And then it happened. A flood of memories burst through, a tidal wave of a past he couldn't remember. He wasn't just a stranger. He was the only son of a billionaire, the rightful heir to an entire empire. But after his father's death, his stepmother, a woman with the smile of a saint and the soul of a snake, had tried to eliminate him. That's why he had been hiding, broken and without a name, until fate led him to my POS stand. But he wasn't a broken man anymore. The days of collapsing with a bucket of water were over. He hired a lawyer with a shark-like grin and dragged that evil woman into court. The evidence was so overwhelming you could build a skyscraper with it, and she lost everything. Now, with his name, wealth, and power restored, he had only one thing on his mind. He was coming back for me. But what would happen when he returned? Would he find me still at my POS stand? Or would I be trapped with my cruel ex? That is the story for part 5, the grand finale. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.
Your face holding on to embrace lonely nights, empty space, your love.
The Girl at the POS Stand. Part 5. He wasn't a stranger anymore. That's what I kept telling myself. The man everyone called Mr. Stranger was actually Mr. Chuck Chattanooga, son of a late billionaire. And this time, he didn't walk into my life in tattered clothes. He arrived in a brand new Mercedes-Benz GLK, its black paint so polished the afternoon sun bounced off it in a blinding cascade, a million fiery diamonds dancing just for me. My heart lodged in my throat. I stood frozen at my POS stand, my fingers fumbling with the money box, a cascade of coins threatening to spill onto the dusty ground. Was I seeing a ghost? Or was this impossibly handsome man, stepping out of a car that cost more than my entire family's possessions, the same kind stranger who had shared stories with me just a few weeks ago? It felt like a dream, a beautiful, terrifying dream. Then, in a moment that stopped the whole street, he did the unbelievable. He got down on one knee right in front of everyone, the vendors, the passers-by, the children playing. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a raw apology. "Clara, I am so sorry. Please forgive me." But my mind, conditioned by a lifetime of caution and hurt, couldn't process the words. My heart hammered against my ribs, and all I could hear was a single, piercing thought. A trap. Kidnapper. I shrieked, my voice tearing through the noisy street. "I knew it! You came to study me, to spy on me, to come back with your rich cars and take me away. I've seen your type before." The fear was a cold, sharp knife. I didn't stop to reason or to explain. I simply ran, leaving my POS machine, my money, my entire world behind me. All I wanted was to escape the golden cage I was sure he was building. I could hear him calling my name, his voice urgent, trying to pull me back to reality, but I just kept running. Just when I thought I was free, a different voice, a familiar, ugly voice, slammed into me like a physical blow. It was my ex, his face twisted in a sneer of victory. But he wasn't alone. He had brought 8 hardened street thugs, their muscles bulging, their eyes filled with a promise of violence. "There he is," my ex barked. "Let's see how Kung Fu can save you now." A familiar tremor of terror shot through me, a ghost from my past returning to haunt me. But then, I looked at Chucks, who stood ready to face them all. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't that trembling girl anymore. With a rush of newfound courage, I clenched my fists, stepped forward, and raised my guard, placing myself side by side with him, a shield and a sword all at once. The fight was a magnificent blur of motion and power. It was like a scene torn from a Chinese movie, with punches cracking the air, kicks landing with the force of thunder, and our movements flowing in perfect, fluid harmony. We were no longer 2 individuals. We were a single, unstoppable force, dismantling 8 grown men like they were made of paper. When the final grunt of pain echoed through the now silent street, all that was left were the scattered, groaning bodies of my ex and his thugs. Chucks and I stood there, breathing hard, our shoulders touching, victorious. In that moment, surrounded by the whispers of the crowd, I knew my life had been forever altered. Later that night, he took me to the very same hotel where I'd once seen him so cruelly mocked. He looked at me with a triumphant smile and told me he had bought it. All of it. He had even fired the arrogant manager who had once humiliated him. My heart swelled with a mix of pride and disbelief. Sitting in that luxurious suite, he told me everything. His amnesia, his wicked stepmother's greed, the brutal court battles, and the true identity of Mr. Chucks Adenuga. And as my mind reeled from the sheer weight of his story, he dropped yet another bombshell. "Clara," he said, his voice soft but firm, "from today, you are no longer the girl at the POS stand. You are the new manager of this hotel." The words hung in the air, a dream too beautiful to be real. From counting a few thousand naira a day to running one of the biggest hotels in the city, it was dizzying. But before I could fully comprehend the change, he knelt again, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond glittered. "Clara, will you marry me?" he asked, his voice full of hope. My heart wanted to burst. I tried to tease him, to hold on to my pride, but my voice failed me. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring his beautiful face. All I could manage was a soft, choked whisper. Yes. It was the easiest and most important word I'd ever spoken. Our wedding was a fairy tale that shook the very foundations of the city. Guests came from everywhere, and yes, even some kung fu masters from China performed stunts that left everyone speechless. I was no longer the battered girl with nothing. I was Mrs. Clara Adenuga, a wife, a hotel manager, and the heroine of a story so incredible, no one would believe it if they hadn't seen it happen. But just as the music swelled and we danced in a sea of adoring faces, I caught a glimpse of something. A black SUV parked quietly outside the hotel. Inside, a woman with sharp eyes and a cold, cruel smile watched us. Chuck's stepmother. A shiver ran down my spine. Her whispered words, "This is not over," echoed in my mind. In that moment, I knew that my new life had just begun, and the greatest fight was yet to come.
Memories start to call. In shadows I will crawl, lost without you all. Gone in the wind, you're gone. Life feels like a sad song.